Okay, waiting to go live, and we are live. Mic seems to be working. Everything seems to be working just fine. I'm going to give everyone a little bit of time to get into the live stream before I formally start. As you can see, no guests today, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Why? No real special explanation, but see a person in. I'll be getting started in just a second. Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen of Vanderbilt and the entire YouTube world, and welcome to Terrier Talk Season 2, Episode 22. We have gone a long way since September. A few things to talk about, obviously, this episode. No guest this week. I am in Baton Rouge for Martin Luther King Day, and of course, I wish everyone a happy MLK Day tomorrow. The other thing I want to announce just real quick before we get into the episode proper, I have decided to do another one of the special episodes that I did last year around this time early on in the calendar year. Last year I did a March Madness bracket prediction, and that episode went really, really long because I wanted to go really in depth about a lot of different things within March Madness, and I feel like it didn't exactly have the same appeal that I want to move towards in this channel in the future. Not to say that I didn't enjoy doing the video or anything like that. I did, but I think it's in the future there's a step that I want to take with this channel. Obviously, when I finish the school year, I'll be moving on to something outside of Vanderbilt sports. I'll be doing college football and NFL football. It's what I want to move to. So I think a good bridge for that, and I'm going to make this announcement now. I'm going to be doing a mock draft special episode for the first round of the NFL draft sometime in April, probably a week or so before the draft. I haven't figured out an exact date for it yet, but it will take place. That's all I wanted to throw out now. I think it will be interesting. I think it will be fun to do. And then I might do a draft review afterwards to talk about how things went and how I didn't expect things like, whatever to happen, and maybe reviewing how each team drafted. So hopefully some people can look forward to that in the future. So moving on to the episode proper now, and that is obviously the review of all of the big sports from this week, all the big sporting events. We'll start with boys basketball. I was at both of these games, both on Friday and Saturday. We took on both at home to start a big homestand that started last week, technically. We took on St. Charles, and this week we took on West St. John on Friday and Point Capite on Saturday. And both games really went very similarly. We play two teams that are from rather small schools, not very big programs, somewhat talented, but not great schools. Both teams that were very beatable. And we played both games very similarly. We played hard. We were intense. We got rebounds. We put in all the effort we needed to in order to win the game, but we had the same problem both times. And it goes back to the biggest problem with this team right now, and that is that we are not a very good shooting team. And we're not very big, and we're not very deep. And when that is the case and you're not a very good shooting team, you don't have the ability to just play close with a bunch of people. You have to scrape and claw and scratch for any points that you can get, and that's what we have to do. In the Point Capite game, we missed 31 shots, which is an obscene number in a 32-minute basketball game. That's almost a shot every single minute, which is a lot to be missing. A lot of them were layups. That's on top of the 4 free throws we missed. We ended up losing the Point Capite game by 9 points in the West St. John game on Friday. We lost by 9 points. They separated at the very end, but it was a very close game throughout. Who do I think is the most improved player on the team? First of all, thank you for asking. But second of all, from last year to this year, I would probably – it's kind of hard to quantify that with this team, especially on varsity in general. And that's because they're two of the biggest contributors we have right now are two players that weren't on the team last year, in Isaiah Parfait and Evan Frank. So I'd say, especially, the last time I saw them on a basketball court before this year, 2 years ago, they've improved vastly from then. But probably the player that improved the most outside of that, because it's kind of hard to look at them specifically, probably the player that improved the most is Jackson. He showed that in one of these games, and I'll talk about that in just a second. He's really become a presence in the paint. We're not a very big team. He's our tallest player, and he's not the prototypical big man, which I think is something that we struggle with a lot. The fact that we don't have that kind of guy to be a true rebounding presence in the paint. We get a lot of rebounds from Isaiah, from Kenny, from Jackson, of course, but because Jackson doesn't have a lot of meat on him, he's not that sort of player. What he is very good at is shooting within the paint. He's probably our best shooter in that way. He's a decent three-point shooter, but he's a very good paint shooter. And he's quicker than a lot of other people that are guarding him because of his height. And because of that, he has a very unique game to him. The small forward type game, despite being the height of a power forward. And I think he's improved a lot from last season. He was very raw last season. He had last year as well, because we didn't really have anyone else. And he improved a lot throughout the season last year because of that. But he's improved a lot from last season to this season, especially as a shooter. So I think that's probably the most accurate answer. Obviously, I didn't see Isaiah or Evan last season. They didn't play. But probably just from the people who played last year is probably Jackson. So let's talk about Jackson's game, because Jackson had probably the best single game performance of the season so far in one of those two games, the point to beat game. It happened yesterday. He had the most productive first quarter I've ever seen, and that's mostly because he had an absolute monster matchup. He was both bigger and quicker than pretty much everyone on the other team, which meant, especially in the first quarter, he just caught fire. He had 9 points and 5 rebounds in the first quarter alone. Now, he cooled off, relatively speaking, after that, but he still finished the game with 20 points and 10 rebounds. I think maybe our first double-double of the season. I might be wrong on that, but we haven't, excuse me, hitting the camera, but we haven't had very many. So a very impressive game from him, at the very least. If he can show that in the future, moving forward, he probably will end up being our leading scorer at the end of the season. If he can show that, he can really be a centerpiece of this team, not just in the present, of course, this year, but even moving forward in the next year when he's a senior. That's probably the big bright spot from the last two games. Even though they were 2 losses, we can take a lot away from them. We missed a lot of layups. And if we can hit those layups and our free throws, we were 2 for 6 from the line. We didn't get to the line very much on Saturday. But if we can get to the line, hit our free throws, hit our layups, and play with the same physicality we have been playing with over the last couple of weeks, we can win some basketball games. We can win some games. We can compete with almost everyone in our district. And I'll talk about that, obviously, in the preview. But most of the teams in our district are beatable this season. And so if we can play that way within the three-point line, we are not a very good three-point shooting team. Within the three-point line, play physical, play with intensity, and go get boards, and actually hit our layups, we can beat a lot of teams left on our schedule. Of course, we play everyone twice in district. That's what's coming up. So that's the boys basketball team this week. 2 losses, but still a lot of positive things to take away from those games. Moving on to girls basketball. They had a pair of games in district as well, on Tuesday versus Assumption, and on Friday at Morgan City. The Assumption game didn't go that well. We played with them for most of the first half, but they ended up separating. We ended up losing 59-31. Didn't have quite the same scoring that we would want to have in a game like that, and they just separated, and sometimes that happens. Assumption's a very good team, but a loss is a loss, but we were able to move on from it, which I think is the most important part of this week. We took a loss versus Assumption, our first in a couple of weeks. But then we go on to a decent team in Morgan City. We travel to Morgan City, and we blow them out in a very similar way to Assumption, the Assumption game. We were up by about 10 points at halftime, and then we go on and we separate from Morgan City in the second half, and we end up winning by almost 40 points. It's a very impressive game from us. That's a really good rebound game, bounce back game, and that's very important going into 2 very big games this week. And I'll talk about that again moving forward in the preview. Moving on to boys soccer, one of the most interesting weeks I've ever seen from really any sport in high school because of not just the rules of how their games worked, and it'll take some explanation, but how the games played in general. So a little bit of background about both these games. They played Pearl River on Wednesday and Noma on Friday. Both of those games are district games. And in districts, in the regular season, if you get a tie, it counts as a tie for your power rating for power points. This is my understanding of it. If I'm incorrect, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure this is how it works. It counts as a tie in power ratings, power points. But for district standings, they have to declare a winner. So you do go on to overtime. And it was a really good experiment this week this our boys play in overtime games. And I'll talk about how that happened in just a second. Because we had 6 ties going into this week. And the 2 losses are great, only having 2 losses this early in the season. But we have to know if we can convert those ties into victories in the playoffs. And we got our first good taste of that this week. We tied Pearl River 2-2. It was kind of a sloppy game in general. We didn't play very well. Sloppy field conditions end up being tied 2-2 going into overtime. And then in overtime against an okay Pearl River team, we go in and we beat them 4-2. So while the game itself isn't very good and it doesn't really help our power ratings that much, we are still the number 1 seed after this week. Winning in overtime shows that this team has the ability to. It really solves one of the biggest question marks going into this week that a lot of people could have had. That's our 7th tie. We've only had 14 wins. And to see that we can convert those ties into victories in overtime is really important. And then we got to take that a step farther in the game against Noma. Noma is a bit of a better team than Pearl River. We talked about that a little bit last week with on. Noma is a very strong team, very good team, kind of a rank outsider for the playoffs this season in our division. And they played like it. They played well. We ended up outplaying them throughout most of the game, but we tied them 0-0. So it was a draw. And we got to see the same thing. In our 8th tie of the season, we finished this week 14-2-8 in technical record. We got to see another example against better competition, how we would compete. We end up tied throughout the entire overtime period, and we go to penalty kicks. And we end up winning in penalty kicks, which is great. Not necessarily very surprising, but still very promising. One of the best players on the team, of course, I had him on last week, is Nick. He has D1, potentially talking to a D1 school in UAB. He has a bright future ahead of him, like I talked about, and he's one of the best players on the team. And having that strength at goalie strengthens you a lot in penalty kick if you are to get to that point. So the fact that we were strong in it and winning isn't surprising, but the fact that we did get the win is very good. It is our overall with our record. It looks like I might have had a little bit of trouble. It's still running. If it's not, I apologize. But hopefully we're still up and running. So I hope that's the case. I might get some information if it's not. I will just keep rolling at least for now if that is what happened. So game against Noma. We end up in the power ratings, but we do get another victory in district. Is of course huge and very good for us, and we have a big district game, the district championship game next week. But first, girls soccer. Finally, to wrap up the review, they had the main events last week against Mount Carmel, and unlike the St. Scholastica game, we kind of saw a reverse of what happened with St. Scholastica, another elite program over the last 2 years. In St. Scholastica, we got blown out last year, and then we come back and beat them this year. Against Mount Carmel, we were down 2-0 at halftime last year. We battle back to tie them, and then we play them again this year, and we get blown out 5-1. This is another game against another very good team that we expect to show up to, and we don't compete in the way that we wanted to compete. And sometimes that happens, and that's unfortunate. And it is a little bit concerning going into playoffs. Now, Mount Carmel is a very, very good team. But we're going to have to play better than, I assume, just looking at the box score, than that score would indicate against Mount Carmel if we want to make a serious run. And I think we can, of course. We have the talent to. We have the seniors to. We have the leadership. We have everything we need to. But that game's not what we need to see in order to get to that point in the state playoffs. Back to the state championship, we have to play well in games like this. Also, we had a win against South Terrebonne, 8-0, no big surprise, on Tuesday. And my point last week that I made is still important. Yes, we're losing these games to very good teams, but we can't forget that we are also a very good team ourselves. Blowing out everyone in our district is still a very big, important achievement, even if our district opponents aren't very strong. But these losses are starting to add up for us. So that's something we have to keep in mind moving into the last few weeks of the season. So moving on to the previews, I'm going to go right back to boys soccer like I just talked about. And the big game they have this week is the district championship game versus Archbishop Hannon on Monday. This game's huge. Hannon is a potential state contender. We are obviously a state contender, so this is a huge game, not just for the district, obviously, and that's very important, but for the implications of state as a whole. Archbishop Hannon is a very good team, a very strong team, and we have a chance to take home the district this week. It's huge. It's important, and I think the big thing to go into this game, the big thing to take away from it going into it is the momentum that we have. We only have 2 losses in the season, and both of them were a while ago. And we've been fighting through draws, fighting to victory, and with all those wins, and all those, whether they're district wins or official wins, we have all the momentum we need to take home what is a very important championship. Yes, we're all worried about state. We're the number 1 team in state in our division. And that's very important. That's huge. And this has a lot of implications for that. But don't forget just how important winning this district championship itself is. In the game itself, again, we're kind of on fire right now. We have a lot of momentum. I would favor us. Hannon's a very good team. People think Hannon is a big state contender, and they are. And I think it's a very big marquee matchup going into this week in just all of boys soccer. But I do favor us in this match. Now, my expertise in boys soccer isn't exactly great, but from what I've seen, I do like us in this game. Moving on to girls soccer, not much to talk about. One interesting thing, though, 2 district games. We take on South Lafourche on Tuesday at home, which is interesting. And then at Allender on Friday, 2 games that we should take care of business just fine. Something interesting about the South Lafourche game, however, both boys and girls basketball take on South Lafourche on Tuesday in district play at home, meaning we'll have 3 district events against the same team basically happening at the same, which is not something I don't think I've ever seen before. So I find that very interesting itself. That's about it for girls soccer. Moving on to girls basketball. They actually have the same, they have the same schedule as girls soccer versus South Lafourche on Tuesday. And instead of going to Ellender on Friday, we host Ellender on Friday. There's something about this game potentially moving to Thursday. I'm not sure about that. It's either this Ellender game or the Ellender game later on in the season. I'm pretty sure it's that one, but just a little bit of a scheduling reminder there. I'm pretty sure this game, both the boys and the girls basketball games are on Friday, but I could be wrong on that. But about the games themselves. These are 2 teams that have kind of had our number over the past few years in district play. But if there's a year for us to beat them in girls basketball, this is the year. We are peaking as a team with this, the group of seniors that we have on this girls basketball team. It's an elite group of seniors, 11 of them. It's an entire roster. And younger kids are also getting playing time. Jemmy, Kaya, Kennedy, and some others getting playing time. But it's a huge group that are all leaders, that are all leading this team. And this is our chance to get huge district victories that we haven't had in the past. Yes, we took the loss to Assumption, but we're still hunting for a district championship. If we can win both these games, we are still right in the thick of things in this district. And so they're both very important games. I think they are both winnable games, and I obviously wish them the best of luck going into it. It's a big game, important game for them, and I think they can win both. Moving on finally to boys basketball, we take on, I'm going to go in reverse order because the South Lafourche game is the main event, not the Ellender game. So the Ellender game on Friday is kind of interesting. Ellender obviously is still a very good team. They won the state championship just a couple years ago, but this isn't the same Ellender team that won that state championship. This isn't quite that elite talent group of players. They're still very good. They're still very strong. But if there's a year for us to beat them, it would be this year. I think we have a very bright future, but I mean, like in the very short term, this is our chance. They're a beatable team. If we can go in and hit our baskets, hit our shots, this game is winnable. If we don't, we might get run out of the gym. We'll see. But I think there is a chance here for us to win that game. And then finally, the main event versus South Lafourche on Tuesday. I know maybe the district championship game versus Hannon for boys soccer is a little bit more important as a whole, but this game versus South Lafourche I think it's worth this slotting in the schedule, I guess, of the video. So the South Lafourche game, and the reason for that is because this is such a unique environment for a game. It is well warranted to talk about here. And it is a very fun environment. South Lafourche is one of the best traveling teams, their fan base in the entire district. And especially to this Vanderbilt game, they bring the student section. And it's somewhat infuriating, but it's also very fun. And it changes the entire complexion, the entire environment, the entire dynamic of the game. Because we're not that used to fans acting like that at our games. And when they are, it changes things. It changes how we act. It changes how we play. And I think this game is going to be something special in a physicality type of way. Neither of these teams are elite teams. This isn't going to be a competition level that we saw in, say, the the Vanderbilt Turlings game in girls soccer, or the whatever, it's probably not going to be the same level of competition that, say, the boys soccer game versus Hannon is this week for the district championship. No, the difference here is just how unique of a rivalry this is. It's very similar to the girls basketball game a few months ago versus Terrebonne at the Jack Becker Classic. These two teams hate each other. South Lafourche especially hates us. And both of us, the way our rosters are built, we're very physical teams. So there's going to be a lot of banging up on each other. There's going to be a lot of physicality, intensity going up for those rebounds, going up for anything that we're doing. And it is going to be a more physical game than maybe we will see at all the rest of the season. Obviously, we'll be traveling to South Lafourche, but outside of that. And that physicality is unique and special and fun to watch in basketball because it just doesn't happen very often. And it's a different game. We're built to do that. They're built to do that. Neither of us are exceedingly talented, exceedingly super fast teams, and they're very beatable. So to open up district, make a statement, this is our chance to do that, to go out and win a huge game versus South Lafourche, one of our biggest rivals in our district. I think it's a game that we really can win if we hit our shots. If we go, and obviously we can play fundamental defense. We've done that all season. But if we play hitting our shots the way we can, the way we know we can, this game is winnable. In this game, I think we will win if we do that. That's the most important thing. That's the most important thing to remember going into this. On Tuesday, obviously I hope to see a lot of people there. Obviously, also support the girls soccer team that'll be playing the same day at nearly the same time in the same place. So support all of the Terriers, of course. Hopefully we can go to as many events as we can. But I wish them the best of luck going into that game, as well as everyone competing this week. But I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and I hope to see you next time. Same time, same channel. See you.